I began my advocacy work when my own child was subjected to cruelty. And the one thing I realized was that every aspect of child protection was crippled in this country. Is that the complainant is at fault. Let's stop when we say that if we don't punish our children, they'll end up in jail. You justify it. The moment you look away, you become an abuser yourself. I'm Tush Wickramanayaka, mother of two, general physician, and chairperson of Stop Child Cruelty Trust. When my own child was subjected to cruelty. As you may know, most advocates, most activists come forward when there is a personal tragedy in their lives. It's almost like adversity that turns into advocacy, and I am no different. When my child, daughter, aged 11 years, was subjected to corporal punishment and subsequently to mental abuse at the beginning of 2018, I did everything I could to try and resolve the issue with the school, with child protection authorities, with the police, and litigation-wise. And the one thing I realized was that every aspect of child protection was crippled in this country. And that is what made me come into advocacy, so that I established the trust in order to start a national campaign to end violence against children, particularly corporal punishment, to end corporal punishment in Sri Lanka, so that no other child will ever have to go through this again. Is that devastated? I mean, no parent would ever want any harm to come to their child through a third party. I still remember this day. It's not so much the incident of the corporal punishment, the actual kneeling or the pulling of the ears or any other physical punishment that my daughter was subjected to repeatedly in the school. But it was after we agreed and came to a settlement in police. It was the subsequent abuse, mental abuse, that reduced my child to a level of a fetus, and that vision of my 11-year-old beautiful, vivacious baby girl lying in bed, curled up in a fetal position, is one that I will never forget in my life, even if I'm old and my memory is failing. The absolute loneliness that I feel and my family was subjected to soon after we complained to school. So we lost all our friends almost overnight, and my children were cornered and treated like social pariahs or outcasts. And to this date, I can count the number of friends we have and the people who have been supportive of us, so that the isolation, both in school and in society, even now, the backlash that we get from the school in particular. There was a sticker campaign, a WhatsApp group, a whole Facebook page, a whole website, all against my children and me. And we were not allowed to participate in any of those conversations. So it was almost like being hung to dry or being crucified alive socially. And that was the most difficult, both for my children and myself. Absolute lethargy of the authorities. It's so frustrating. You feel as if you want to go and shake them into action. It's been very, very frustrating to get any kind of activity forward. I mean, when we started off, it was great. You know, we had the backing of the former president and his office. But then very soon, when there were issues in the country, the government's change, etc., everything has slowed down. I mean, we don't get a letter, an answer to one of our letters. We don't get to meet anyone. We don't get any kind of response. So it's actually the bureaucratic lethargy, the absolute crippling of agencies is the most frustrating it has been. And it is with sheer indefatigable effort that we keep going as a trust alone, keeping this awareness up on a daily basis, so that since we've started in 2018, violence against children, corporal punishment has been a daily topic, and we are very happy that we've been able to bring that to the forefront. Also, we have done a lot of training of teachers nationally, starting with the National Teacher Training Institute and other agencies. But that's been almost a lonely path, because we haven't had the backing of the government to do things. We've also been very active in our advocacy work, wanting to do a dual role with legislative changes as well as changing attitudes, the latter a bit harder. So our work has been quite frustrating with the authorities. It's very simple. One is a transparent complaints mechanism. One of the things that happens is that when you complain to school or any authority, any place in Sri Lanka, whether it's a bank, a school or any other place, the first thing that happens is that the complainant is at fault. So when in a school scenario, if a child complains, if a parent complains, then automatically there is a backlash towards the complainant. So in other countries, the very first thing that they do when you enter a child or you go and open up a bank account is a complaints mechanism, which is very transparent, and there is no name or blame associated with it. Second is that all teachers must have child psychology training. It's actually quite shocking, the number of teachers who have no idea how to manage a child, the simple classroom misbehaviors. In fact, the child psychology training is just half a chapter in the actual teacher training curriculum, and absolutely none in the private sector. So there are teachers who are just being brought off the streets to become teachers in the private sector, and they have absolutely no training whatsoever. So it is imperative that every person who deals with a child must undergo compulsory child psychology training, particularly in schools. Third is that every school must have an internal child protection policy or a safeguarding policy. Now, the Ministry of Education has given out a circular saying that children cannot be punished. It's illegal, you must not touch a child. But this circular is not valid for all schools. It's not valid for private schools. It's not valid for Pirivens. It's not valid for international schools. So every school, every education institute where a child is, where a dancing school is, where a sports group is, must have an internal child protection mechanism, so that if something happens, there is a very clear pathway that you can follow, which are based on national and international norms. We now live in the 21st century. So let's stop with this, oh, we were hit and we are doing absolutely fine theory. Let's stop with the kirihodda that you need to stir like a gravy and hit a child. Let's stop this myth of spare the rod and spoil the child. Let's stop with the myth that this is a Western influence of our country. No. Let's stop with, our parents did this, our grandparents did it, so why not our children? Let's stop when we say that if we don't punish our children, they'll end up in jail. These are all good for the cave ages. Why would you want your children to go to universities overseas, which most parents seem to want to do? It's because we know that they would have a better life. What is the better life? The better life is that you have your rights, you have a better standard in society, that they are safe. So let's treat our children in Sri Lanka the same way. Do not ignore a child. Do not ignore your neighbor. Recently, a child was beaten to death. Let's not get to the stage where we actually normalize violence. that we justify the abuse with all the myths that I said before. Let's voice, let's act, and let's stop immediately, because the moment you justify it, the moment you look away, you become an abuser yourself. Is to empower the government and energize them to follow through with the very recent Supreme Court decision given out in February 2021, where the Supreme Court gave a very historic decision banning all forms of cruelty to children, whether it's physical or mental. And the beauty of this decision is that they actually took into consideration the penal code, and they actually rejected some of the archaic clauses within the penal code. That's the very first time that a judiciary has rejected our own laws. It rejected the myths of the kirihodda, specifically it is mentioned there, and the social attitudes. It took into consideration the circular by the government advising not to punish children. It took into consideration the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child, the Convention, and so it was a combination of both national, and it also took into account the Constitution. So this is the very first time that the Supreme Court bypassed the legislature and gave a decision. So it's very easy now for the government, if they truly care, if they truly believe that our children are our future, they will implement this, because already the Supreme Court has given the green light. The long-term goal for Stop Child Cruelty is actually to make our people unlearn what they have learned for decades. It's very easy to introduce something new, but it's very difficult to make them follow through, because to learn something, you need to unlearn what you have done for so many years, and that is very difficult. So our efforts in changing the curriculum, in our efforts in training the teachers, in our efforts in raising awareness, and in our efforts to raise the support of both the national and international community will have to keep going. Just say no.